Hello, my name is Tola Balajovi. I am a counselor here at Masters, and I have the honor of interviewing one of my coworkers and a wonderful counselor at Masters, Flora Chan. I'm so excited to learn a lot more about you. And like I said, it's an honor to have you on our team. So the first thing I wanted to know about you is what made you become a counselor?
Honestly, I just think it's through life experience because I was a client to myself, sitting on a chair, feeling absolutely lost in life and needing help. And after walking out of that counseling room, I thought, you know what? I want to be the person to help others. I want to be the person to, I guess, just be able to walk with someone in their journey. So, and I love helping others.
Yeah. And you're so like, I feel like your presence is so warm and inviting. And I think that's a really, really important part of being a counselor and being able to create a safe space for others. So how do you think you go about creating that safe space for your clients?
Yeah, I really want to ensure my clients feel heard and seen. And and so I open up myself. I share a little bit of my personal journey with them, kind of like how I did with you just now, just telling them, you know what, I was in your seat and I was feeling lost or feeling, all these emotions and I had nowhere to go. And so I find that when I start that off with clients, I just be on the same plane with them, that it creates a safe environment for them to open up.
So it's kind of sounds like what you're saying is kind of modeling that openness and that safety, being able to open up and be vulnerable and say, hey, like I'm a human too, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a perfect person. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to journey with you and kind of help you find those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I notice, clients don't need to know how much education you have and what big terms you know. Like they just need someone to listen a lot of the times and to show them compassion.
Yeah, so right. And even when it comes to, working with clients and kind of your therapeutic practice, the modalities you use, what are some of those modalities and how do you decide what is right for each individual client?
Right. So I'm very kind of client centered in terms of showing them, putting them first, right? Using kind of empathy and compassion. I do have training in cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's really helpful for clients who like structure, who enjoy doing homework, like exercises and a lot of skills training. And, for those that are not as cognitive or don't like all this homework, I love using internal family systems, which dives into, different parts of ourselves and looking, deeper into, how our behavior is connected, with our feelings and our thoughts. So again, it's really integrative with CBT, IFS, and as well as EMDR for trauma work.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about, for maybe folks at home who have never heard of those things, what essentially is CBT and what essentially is EMDR? I know those are really big questions, but
Yeah. I referred to it a little bit. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, basically cognitive is thinking, behavior is how we act, right? And the feeling portion. So, basically how we think affects how we feel and then in turn affects how we act. And so we really go dive deep into how our thoughts affects our behaviors. And I think it's a very helpful process for people to understand how they think affects them. So, and I enjoy that about cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah.
and then EMDR as well.
EMDR is eye movement. And so it's based on the fact that your body, when it's sleeping, it's got this REM sleep, this kind of deep sleep, and it really your body heals itself when you're in rest mode. And so we kind of imitate and mimic that eye movement, reprocessing therapy. So using that in sessions to help with processing thoughts or trauma or even unwanted, maybe past, if it's like a PTSD, if some type of visual, or if it's a car accident, something that happened to you and you just can't get over it. And so I feel that EMDR is really helpful with trauma.
That's awesome. And yeah, I know you do a lot of trauma work. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, with trauma, I feel like it takes a lot for people to settle and just be even in their nervous system to feel calm internally. And I think that's my goal is get into a client's kind of the inside, like what they're thinking and how they're processing, or if they're even regulating at all internally. And so some of that just involves a lot of just whether it's kind of deep breathing, somatic, just to calm themselves so they're able to feel safe with themselves internally.
So cool. And I know you also do mindfulness, breath work, visualization. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah. So I love taking that kind of, I feel it's more holistic approach, right? So if, for example, if I'm talking this fast, Tola, does it feel like I have anxiety? Because I just keep talking and talking and talking and I'm going to stop. So, so you feel that, oh my gosh, the rate this
Yeah.
person is speaking at, the tone, there's so much, and that's just externally. So I can't imagine internally what's going on, right? So if we even just slow down, deep breathe, whew, okay, let's pause
Wow,
and
I feel like
just,
the air literally shifted.
right?
Like, oh, I'm
Like,
more calm.
right. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that even so, it's funny because I do that with my clients, but inside, I'm also sensing, right? Anxiety.
Yeah.
Ooh, is this working? So if a person can calm their body down, immediately, like, the rest of the body calms down and it helps them with to think, I think, clearly and process things, just to tone things down a bit. So I find that mindfulness, breath work, it helps them to be in tune and to increase that sense of self-awareness with themselves. Yeah.
So like the somatic way of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
cool. I love that. And I know you work with a lot of other types of populations. So can you tell us a little bit more of what types of clients you see?
Yeah. Well, I do enjoy working with young adults because I used to serve the youth group. And I just love that kind of transition stage where these big decisions in life, whether it's dating, relationships, or even like career or like, and even to the kind of young adult, like kind of premarital counseling when you're meeting like a life partner, like so many changes, right? In your young adulthood, in your 20s. And I love working with children. I have 3 children myself and they're 11, 14, and 16. So I love that age group. And then adults, I enjoy couples work lots because I know I've had my share of marriage problems and I'm just like, man, I found a counselor helpful and I feel like I need to grow. So I love working with couples. I think it's just a privilege to be part of their healing journey.
When you say like, yeah, we're all on a healing journey, what does that mean to you?
Well, we don't live in a perfect world. So
Yeah.
we come into it with parents that may try their best, but also bring in their, whether it's trauma or history or parenting style, because we're shaped and molded, right, by the people we're around, right? And so we get hurt in life, we might get bullied, our parents might not like the way we look, or we might not meet up to their expectations. There's all these kind of, and really, we live in a society where things are set at a really high standard. For some reason, perfectionism seems like the standard, which is unrealistic.
Yeah.
And so, and healing from that critical inner voice, whether that's ours or from an external voice like that, and healing even for ourselves, because we've set such high expectations for ourselves to be like, okay, and learning to even forgive ourselves, like that relationship with self, I feel like is so integral in our healing journey.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, and this conversation about self and our influences, it makes me think a lot about, for me in my practice, cultural competence is huge. And it's a really, really important thing to me. So I'm so curious about you, and you come from a Chinese background, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, how does your background influence your approach to counseling?
Yeah. I'm kind of like a watered down Chinese background. My parents, they're from Malaysia. So my grandparents were from China. So
Okay.
I came to Canada when I was 6. So we've lost a lot of that cultural piece, but the immigration piece, like that was a big one to relate to clients, but also the kind of like, okay, we don't talk about emotions, just do your homework,
Yeah.
just your piano, and, get good grades at school. Right. And I think
Yeah.
it's more of a generational thing. But, now especially from a mental health perspective, it's like, wow, like no one ever talks about, hey, how are you feeling today? Like no one ever asked me
Right.
that growing up.
Right. So that could be huge for someone who's never heard it before. It's, like, what do you mean, how am I doing? And I kind of relate to that in my background of like, what do you mean? Does it matter?
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that cultural piece, it does play. And I realize that part of it, it's definitely the fact that I look Asian, I can be more relatable to Asian clients. But that kind of generational piece is more like,
Yeah.
okay, now we can kind of, try to meet the client where they're at, right? Because I know that there's similar parenting styles in my generation. So,
And maybe even I wonder like the understandings of maybe in other cultures, this might be weird or taboo, but like this is very typical in, a Chinese culture or a different type of cultural background. So how do you approach those things? So kind of sounds like that knowledge or that understanding really benefits you in your work.
yes, yeah. And even in kind of like your background, a more collective society versus
Yeah.
individualistic, which really happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that worldview is huge, right? Because even in Western society, things look so different, or we're taught to not focus as much on the collective and just like, what are you doing? What's going on for you? Right. So that can be a really hard thing for people to relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And another thing that's really cool about you that I think we have in common is your work with issues kind of around infertility, marriage, and postpartum struggles. So can you tell us a little bit about your work with that and the types of challenges that you see in that area?
Yeah. Yeah. I work with that because it's a very specific area, but I realize there's again a sense of grief, kind of asking yourself, what's wrong with my body? Why isn't it working properly? And I can't imagine the amount of frustration. And I've heard stories from family members, from friends of like, not having like they had this great set timeline, they wanted to have a family, and I'm just like, I feel for them. I'm just like, oh, I can't imagine, right? To not have things. I think that control piece, or to be like, to even question, like, I thought I was perfectly healthy, like, what's wrong? And I feel like that's a grieving process in itself. And I've had a lot of traumatic experiences with people that try to get pregnant, to try to have a child, right? And then the miscarriage piece, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is so much grief work that people, it's almost like taboo to talk about. It's not something that you talk
Yeah.
about at a workplace, at a coffee with a friend. Like,
Yeah.
it's something that you have to be kind of in a special place and at the right time to kind of share these, because you don't want to ever offload these problems to people as well. So again, creating that safe place for people to talk about these subjects, right? And to meet them where they're at is, I feel like that's that woman that need that kind of holding on and giving them space is so important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do. It is grief work is what it is. I feel like when it,
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations recently with whether it be at our admin team or other counselors about just like how integral that grief piece is. And a lot of times people have no idea that what it is that they're struggling with is actually grief. Like grief is at the heart of that. And I feel like because of the work that I've done in the postpartum area, like I've done a lot of grief work. I got a lot of grief experience just because that is a really big part of that. The kind of last question of the day is for those people who may be watching or clients listening and people who hesitate to start therapy, what type of advice or what would you say to someone who's feeling maybe unsure about starting the therapy process?
um, I would say just like without any commitment, you can always just have a conversation with a therapist that you might want to connect with and just get a feel for the person. And honestly, it might just be taking that step of faith to be like, hey, you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen? Right?
Yeah,
That's my thing. It's like, okay, well, and hey, if it helps, that's great. Why not?
that's so great. Well, thank you, Flora, so much for taking the time and chatting with me today. I love learning more about you. And for folks watching at home, if you want to learn more about Masters, the services we offer, or working with Flora, you can visit our website, Masters Counseling. Thank you so much, Flora.